Welcome to the Senior Podcast Show. My name is Corey Lear. I'm the Director of Communications with the Senior Companies. I am here today with another special guest. We have Donna Barkho here from the Barkho Law Firm. She is one of our senior network partners, and she is also one of the co-founders of the Barkho Law Firm. She has a really interesting story, a really interesting perspective to give to our clients on something that we all don't like to talk about that much. it's estate planning.
But we have to.
Yeah, I say it. I say it jokingly in that, even I was telling you off camera, it's one of those topics where we know it's important to talk about, but it's kind of a sad topic to bring up. But it's one of those topics that we have to have discussions about because you never know what can happen. Life is short. Having those plans in place can, support the people that you want to make sure have a plan for you or know what your plan is. That way all the guessing is gone.
Absolutely.
So our listeners know that our show involves all things senior. So we've talked in the past about senior living and the different levels of care. We have talked about memory care. We've talked about hospice and home health care. And so this is just one of those very fitting topics. But I love it because it's not just for seniors. And I think that's a myth, sort of what we were saying, like, it's just only for people, and then you have to be rich on a yacht,
rich or senior citizen, or own a ton of properties.
Yeah, and that's just not true. I like that you said off camera. You said if you own a home, then estate planning's for you.
It's for you.
I think that's a huge, profound thing to say because so many think it's not. It's really, really important. So I love that. So estate planning and elder law, it's such a broad term. Can you break that down a little bit about what the difference is? Obviously, they'll go hand in hand, but there is a difference in them.
Right. No, they do go hand in hand. I like to think of it as elder law is the kind of the big picture. Estate planning is just a branch of that. Because elder law will cover a lot of things. It covers long-term care planning. And what that is, it's the idea of what if later down the road in my life, I need nursing home care or I need some kind of long-term care? It's the idea of how am I going to pay for it if I don't have the funds?
Yeah.
Do I ask my family to pay for it? Do I dip into, all my retirement and my savings? Do I have to sell my house? Do I have to get on Medicaid to pay for nursing home care?
And those funds go quick.
Yeah. Oh, yes. So I think the average in the state of Michigan is like $13,000 to $15,000 a month for certain homes. So it could definitely dwindle down your life savings.
Absolutely.
So long-term care planning is doing the planning now to save your money later on down the road, should you need that kind of care. That's just one component of elder law. Another is guardianship and conservatorship. This is the idea of I'm healthy now, but what if I'm incapacitated from an accident, from an illness, for any reason? Who's going to step in and take care of me and deal with my financial affairs or my legal affairs without doing any kind of pre-planning? You're going to court to get someone appointed to help you.
And then too, like if you're not in the right mind to make those decisions, you could end up with someone that you didn't want. The court tries to make like the most educated decision based on what is laid out for them, but
absolutely. And that's the great thing about doing the planning now is you get to choose.
Preventative.
Yeah, you get to choose. If you have a really, if you have a child who you really are comfortable with and you trust, you could choose them, a family member. I mean, anyone you want, of course. So that's why it's so important to do the pre-planning. That's pretty much elder law. It kind of encompasses everything. And estate planning, what we're here to talk about today is just kind of a branch of elder law.
Yeah. But I think it's sort of the basis for all of that, though, in a sense, because although like you might not necessarily deal with conservators and guardianships, you do help them make like powers of attorney and things like that, which is sort of how it starts. So speaking of that, so then what are powers of attorney exactly? And then you mentioned something really interesting that goes along with that. Like you say people 18 and up need that. That sounds crazy to me.
It's a big thing that I always advocate for with families I meet. I'm like, do you have any kids who are 18 years old? But let me backtrack and talk about powers of attorney and kind of what they are and how they work. So I describe it as such a simple document, but it's so powerful in what it does. essentially what it is, it's, the same scenario of what if I'm healthy now, I'm good, I'm doing this planning. What if I become incapacitated? Or what if I'm out of the country? Or what if something happens where I'm just not able to make decisions or to do things for myself? Things like going to the bank, writing checks, calling and talking to the cable bill guy. Having a power of attorney in place allows you to choose a person or maybe multiple people to step in and do those things for you in the event you're unable to do so yourself. Things happen all the time. Accidents happen all the time. I could say, oh, I'm healthy now. I don't need a power of attorney. I can make my own decisions and do things for myself. But you never know when.
You could be in a car accident
you
at
never
any
know.
time.
Yeah.
That's right.
It's scary to think. COVID was a great example.
Oh my gosh,
Because
right?
nobody thought that would come out of the blue. And now all of a sudden people are scrambling to do some kind of planning.
That's right. And that was affecting people young and old.
Oh, absolutely.
And they still can't figure out why some people had such a hard time fighting it and other people didn't. Why did some people have the sniffles and why were some people on vents?
It's just so unpredictable. Life is unpredictable.
That's a really good point.
And to kind of touch on what you said about 18-year-olds, and what I always say is, once your child becomes 18, once they're off to college, you no longer have the ability to make decisions for them anymore.
That's right.
If they go to the hospital, doctors don't necessarily come to you to make a decision. If you want to call their college up because you're paying their tuition and you want to talk to the financial department, you can't do that without your child's permission. So a big thing is to get them those powers of attorney. There are two kinds of powers of attorney.
Yeah.
There is a financial power of attorney. In the state of Michigan, it's usually called a durable power of attorney. That covers you for your financial and your legal affairs.
Okay.
So things like going to the bank and dealing with any kind of legal matter that you may have. On the other side of that, we have a healthcare power of attorney. Sometimes you'll hear this is called a patient advocate form. Different names for it. Michigan calls it a healthcare power of attorney.
I love that you're talking about the differences in them because when I worked at a skilled nursing facility, I did physical therapy, and a lot of the times we would have people who would have POAs, but they didn't necessarily know that just because they were the DPOA that's not healthcare.
No.
Like you could do their finances so you can help in the discharge planning as far as what's their next step, but we weren't obligated to necessarily tell them those healthcare related things unless the patient said it was okay.
And that's a problem.
And it is a problem. And I think that's a really big myth since we're talking about myths here. They're just like, yeah, I'm the DPOA. I can take care of all of that. And I'm like, well, technically, no.
And
it
kind
that's
of gives you a false sense of security because you think you have the forms ready. And unfortunately, you don't.
They're like, this is it right here. And I'm like, it isn't.
No, Sally, it's not.
Yeah.
So in the way our office does it, in your healthcare power of attorney, we grant the person you name. Again, you can name multiple people, or you can have layers of people. For instance, if I name you as my first healthcare power of attorney, if you're unable to act for any reason, I can name my sister as the second, or my mom. I mean, anyone you want to choose. So you are kind of protected in layers of those agents.
So if for some reason, like what would be the catalyst that would take me out? Like how would... Like if your sister was the next person after me, would I have to be like ill or incapacitated? Because like, how do you stop them from saying, well, no, I want this and I want that? Like, how does that work?
It could simply be you just can't, you don't want to do it. You can kind of relinquish that authority and say, I don't want to do this. Or maybe you are ill, or maybe you're just not around for some reason.
So would I have to, or like as part of that plan, is like, does someone have to be notified for like the second person to take over, or how does that, they're listed so they can?
If you're around and you just don't want to do it for whatever reason, there's a document that we'd fill out that would say you're kind of giving up your rights to it, and now it would go to the next.
Okay, that's interesting.
It's pretty simple when it moves from person to person.
Yeah.
But in that healthcare power of attorney, we give the HIPAA authorizations to allow your agent to access your medical records. We also tie in the living will. So this is something that there's a huge misconception out in the community of what a living will is. Lots of people feel like your living will is the document that disposes of your property, that says who you want to receive your antiques and your jewelry and all that. But there's a difference between a last will and testament and a living will.
Okay.
So the living will talks about your end of life decisions. So if someone is at that stage where they are on, they're in a coma that's irreversible, or they're terminally ill where they're not coherent and they're at that last stage of life. Your living will lays out what kind of care you would want. Do you want to pull the plug, so to say, or do you want to stay on life support? Do you want feeding tubes or hydration tubes? So really, you're laying all of that out. You're pretty much giving instructions to your agent and saying, this is what I want to happen if you ever have to step in for me.
Right. Please help me carry that out.
Yes, pretty much, yes.
And again, those are the conversations that we don't like to have because we don't like to think about those things happening to our family members, but they do happen. And I appreciate that you kind of talked about the difference of what a living will is and a will, because I think that is a notion that a lot of people don't know. So I think the living will, as you said, talks about like laying out your final wishes.
Yes.
Where the will does what?
The will talks about, it's kind of a couple things actually. So a big one is it lays out the disposition of your property.
Okay.
So if I am to pass away, who's going to receive everything I own? And you get to lay out, this person gets this, and you can get really like granular.
My ugly elephant handbag
goes to this person. I don't like her, so she can get the ugly bag.
Yeah.
A big one for wills is we lay out guardianship of minor children.
That is a huge one.
So another thing I always say is if the moment you become a parent, you should start thinking about getting at least a will in place just for that reason. And it's not that you're going to name someone on your will and that person automatically gets your kids if something were to happen, because it still has to go through the court system, which is another huge myth about wills.
Yeah, isn't it just my magical document?
Yeah,
everything's done. Yeah,
sadly, no. And that's the thing. And many people feel like I have a will.
I'm protected.
I'm done. Like if anything happens, my kids will take this and just do what they have to do. And sadly, that's kind of not the truth, because you do have to go through probate court. The best way I like to describe it is to think of it as your will being like a guide to the judge. It may turn out the exact way you want it, but wills are so contestable that it may turn out completely different than what you wished for.
Like I guess, for instance, like if I said I wanted my family, my marital side or whatever, to have it, and then my husband's side fought them for it, like that is where
it could happen. Oh yeah, it could totally happen. I mean, when it comes to minor children, it's a little more nuanced because the court looks at the best interest factors and they just whatever's best for the kids. But the will as a whole, even as far as your property and all of that, it is contestable. So that's one thing to think about when getting a will done. It's very important, though, if you have kids, because you are able to name guardians in there, which allows the judge and the court to know who you felt comfortable with and who your children probably felt comfortable with as well.
That's interesting. So for the will, you said it talks about property and it talks about naming someone to be in charge of the children. What else does it do?
Those are the two big main ones. There is, I don't know if we've talked about trusts yet on the today. I don't think we have talked about trusts yet. So there is something called a living trust, which is kind of a step up from a will.
Okay.
Which allows you to do a little more. There are a few key differences between the two. So a will, like I said, you get to name guardians and get to name who receives, your property. That goes to court. A trust, you don't name guardians in a trust, but you do use it for disposal of your property. You can name pretty much anything, separate accounts, your house, all of that named in the trust. The big key difference here is with a trust, we have to go through your finances and rename everything to become a part of that trust.
Okay.
So things are now held under your trust name. That is what's keeping it from going to probate court.
Interesting.
And just to put it out there, a few big reasons why people want to avoid probate court is it's costly.
Yeah.
So
yes.
It can cost anywhere from about 5 to 10% of the value of your estate that's going through the court system.
It's a lot if it's your house too.
Oh my gosh, yeah. And I mean, if you're talking about a $300,000-$400,000 house,
which pretty much every house is anyway.
Yeah. Oh yeah, or higher now. Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
So, costly, time consuming. I would say we see on average probate, an estate going through probate, usually 18 to 24 months.
That's insane.
So it's a couple of years, year or two, I would say, to be complete. And then things become public when they go through court. If you guys ever see your favorite celebrities, you see their will blasted everywhere. It's because they had a will that had to go through courts. Trusts completely avoid all of that. They stay private. They don't have to go through the court system at all. If it's drafted properly, it could be as simple as when I pass away, the person I've named to kind of execute the trust, the trustee, takes things and just does things privately and makes distributions. So it could be that simple.
When there is a trustee appointed, how is that overseen? Like if I chose you and you did mine for me, are you involved in that? Like how the trustee carries out those wishes?
So typically, if I have a trust drafted up for myself right now, usually I'm the trustee of the trust until I pass away. If I have a spouse, that spouse now becomes the next trustee if I were to pass. Now, if we were to both pass, it's going to go down to who we named next.
Okay.
There's documents that they sign. They're a fiduciary to the trust. Everything has to be done kind of like clean cut and legally. If they are doing something that's wrong, if they are doing something that's fraudulent or smuggling money or something of that sort, the beneficiaries who are to receive money could now take them to court and proceed with legal action. Yeah,
I see.
The thing is, the trustee has to keep tabs, like an inventory of what they're doing, that the beneficiaries get to see. So they're being watched.
Yeah, there's checks and balances, and there has to be.
Oh, there has to be.
Because, I don't know, death does funny things to people, and I'm sure you've seen a lot of that throughout your years of practicing what happens.
Oh my gosh, you'd be surprised at how many families I talk to where they tell me, my kids are great, they all get along wonderfully. And I'm like, they do now, but when money makes people funny.
It does.
So when someone passes away and now you're leaving a ton of money, kids kind of go crazy and kind of start acting different. So don't always rely on good relationships. Always just have it written down. Even if it's just going equally between the kids, it's good to have it.
Yeah, because that takes that out. Then, and even if you decide not to share that with everybody, which you don't have to share your plan with everybody, I actually think that's probably a good idea to not maybe tell everybody all the time, because that starts some issues with family harmony right there. Yeah. So I think that's really interesting. So you have told us about living will. You told us about trust. What are some other myths you feel like need to be busted?
They're really big ones. I mean, they kind of all go hand in hand.
Yeah.
You know, when it comes to estate planning, everyone always feels like you have to be a senior citizen.
Yeah.
You have to be very wealthy. You have to have, properties all over the country.
I mean, that sounds great.
Right? Yeah, I mean, that wouldn't be bad. That wouldn't be a bad thing, a bad position to be in. Estate planning is for everyone. I believe estate planning is for a single person. It's for a family. It's for anyone, senior citizens. I mean, it's there to protect you. Almost everyone owns some kind of property. They have something. And if they are to pass away, who's going to get that? And more importantly, it's not even about where the property goes. It's always about protecting yourself as well. Of what if I do become incapacitated? What if I'm a single person living home alone and something happens to me and now I can't do anything for myself? Who's going to step in and help me? Is it going to be my friendly neighbor? Is it going to be, like my long lost nephew? I mean, it's got to be someone. Yeah. And to name someone is really important.
I'll say, and that's when, if you don't have that plan, then the court just does it for you.
Yeah. I mean, if there's absolutely no one, just get appointed someone from the court.
If that were to happen to a single person who didn't have a lot of family close, but then someone came up, do you find that the judge would consider the person who wants to step up that is related or is friendly?
They would. I mean, unless there was something weird going on there. But the judge would consider. I could imagine they would consider anyone who would step up to want to help.
That's interesting. I mean, lots of scary situations. And I think, again, having these conversations aren't fun, but I also think you learn a little bit more about each other too. And you don't have to have this conversation all at once. You don't have to say, we have to sit here and break down every single thing. Like little chunks, I think helps. This time we'll talk about what we'd like to leave to the kids. The next time we can talk about filling out those advanced directive forms about, if I want life-saving measures or if I just want to, have palliative care or whatever.
Yeah. And what we do at the Barkho Law Firm is, that first meeting with me, I like to educate. So I will make sure you understand.
This is perfect then.
I like to make sure you understand, everything that was going to go into your estate plan. I let you know what decisions you have to make, and then I let you go home with it and let it sink in, think about it. Because it's not easy on,
No,
you know,
they
sitting
are
down in
hard.
front of someone just that moment, telling us where you want things to go and
Right.
who you want to take care of you. It's good to think about it to make sure you're making the best decision.
Mhm.
And another note I want to make on that
Yeah.
is lots of families think, I want my son to be my financial power of attorney, and I don't want to let my daughter feel left out, so I'll name her like one too. So they're both financial powers of attorney.
Yeah.
I wouldn't worry about what that person's gonna feel if you don't name them. You really should name who you feel like would do the best job in a certain whatever status you're naming them as. If you feel like you can't trust your youngest daughter because she's frivolous with money, maybe you shouldn't name her as your trustee of your trust.
Yeah.
You don't always have to name family, although it could be. This is a point I wanted to make.
That is an interesting point too. Wow. Yeah, because every family dynamic is different, and we all have different strengths. I can see that in families. We all have our own personalities and things we're better with.
Oh, for sure.
With our life experiences. I think that's really good advice.
Yeah, and I just come across it so much where, mom and dad are sitting in front of me and they just say that they feel bad for leaving one of their kids out of a certain responsibility. And that's what it is. It's a responsibility. So you don't feel bad for leaving them out of it.
It's a big responsibility too. Do you encourage people to, before they formally name someone and have you draw up that paperwork that you say, like, did you have the conversation about what this responsibility you're asking of your son or daughter exactly is?
Yeah, I like to bring it up. You don't necessarily have to tell that person. You could completely leave everything private until the day that they need to use it. But if you are naming, a certain family members or friends, I always think it's a good idea just to bring it up to them just in case, to make sure they are up for it. Otherwise, make sure you have a couple other people listed then just in case.
Yeah, because it really is. I mean, it sounds fine until you're like, you are in charge of my healthcare directive, and while that's what I want, these are my wishes drawn out, carrying them out doesn't just because it's written doesn't make it easy to follow. No, especially if we all have our own biases and things like that and how we feel about things. Like, just because that's what you want doesn't mean I agree. And so you're putting that person in a position to follow what your wishes were.
It's rough. It's a big responsibility.
It is. Yeah. It really is. And I think if you've, worked in healthcare and stuff, like, you see those things all the time and you see it on your end. Cause I'm sure when people get in that position, they're like, oh, well, I better call Donna cause she's the one who helped me draft these things or whatever. Like, I'm sure you get interesting calls.
Yeah. And that's kind of a good point is, with every family that we meet, every estate plan that we have drawn up, when the time comes that the kids or whomever's listed has to do something, we encourage them to call us so we could sit down and walk them through what they need to do.
That's amazing.
Yes,
that's amazing.
It's hard. It's a big job. It's overwhelming.
Where do I even start?
Yeah, and with the emotions that you're going through because you just lost a loved one, now you have to take care of things that you probably don't want to think about or read about. So
because you're just sad.
Yeah.
Well, and I think it's funny too. And I was telling you off camera that I was doing some research and I found information about a death box. And like, it was very funny the way that the article was written. It was like, what is that, my coffin? And they're like, no, it's a box that you would put in all of your important documents, like your insurance documents. Maybe you put like your home deed in there and different passwords to like banking and things like that. Because like we were saying, you have 100 different passwords for everything. I mean, honestly, they tell you not to make them all the same, but sometimes it's so hard because you're like, where am I keeping all of these passwords at? So like, I just thought that was like an interesting tidbit. And I think, as you start like making these forms or you come across things, like trying to shove them into the same folder so that if something does happen, at least you can say, hey, I have a folder in the back of my closet and it has some of these important documents in there so that you know where to find them.
Yeah, no, I'm really glad you brought that up because that's a big question lots of people ask. It's okay, I have my estate plan now. What do I do with it?
Yeah, exactly.
Lots of people feel like you have to register it with the county that you live in. And Michigan doesn't require that you register your will anywhere.
Okay.
So you keep it in a safe place. If you have kids, if you have someone you trust, maybe give them a copy of it just in case you do misplace that the original. I always say keep it locked up in a safe place. For sure, let someone know about it.
Yeah.
I can't tell you the amount of times I've had a phone call where, someone calls me up and they say my mom or dad just passed away, and how do I find out if they had a will? I don't know if they had one.
Oh my gosh.
And the only advice we can give them is if you could check with the county in case they did register it, but since that's not required, it's likely not going to be
Also,
there.
a lot of people probably don't.
They're going to start digging through their house. And
Oh
it's
my
a big
gosh.
job.
And if
It's
they've
not a
been
fun
living in the
job.
house for 40 years, like you're searching through a ton of things.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Boxes and basements and attics. So it's important to let someone know.
Yeah, for
Give them a
sure.
copy. Our office always keeps copies.
Thank goodness.
Yes. So we're required to do it for a number of years. I mean, we're planning to hold on to them for as long as we can.
Yeah.
Dispose of anything. So we'll have digital copies. The family will get their originals and keep them in your death box or in case I die
your
box.
death box. Well, I guess the other term I told you was a knock box, next of kin box, which I guess sounds a little nicer.
Yes, much nicer.
I like the death box. Sounds a little funny. Shove some other weird things in there to go along with your will and trust.
And it doesn't even have to be locked up under lock and key. It could just be in your desk drawer.
Because they can't change it. It's
No
not
one
like
could
they
change
can
it.
white it out and add
No.
things in.
No.
I mean,
Nobody can. I mean, in fact, you wouldn't be able to do that for
Right.
yourself. Yeah.
yeah, unless they were like, oh, here, can you just initial this down? I just changed this. And speaking of which, too, some people might already have estate planning already done. However, I think, like if I created one, as I continue to age, my wishes might change.
Oh, yeah.
Who I want to be beneficiaries on things might change. So, services are available to continue to update those. And I think it's something people should regularly do.
Absolutely.
What if you sell your house and it's listed on there and then...
Yeah, absolutely. Things change all the time. People get married, people pass away, your kids become of a certain age where now you would want to name them in a certain capacity. So changes are made to estate plans all the time. Sometimes the whole thing needs to be reworked. Sometimes it's just a sentence that we would have to make a change to.
How often do you think people should review that? I mean, obviously after a big life event.
Absolutely. If someone's getting married, if someone passes away, it's always good to look at that. Otherwise, I would say every few years would be good to just revisit it.
Even if it's for yourself.
Oh, yeah.
Because relationships change.
Oh, yeah, for sure. We do offer free consultations. I like to do free reviews as well. So if someone does have an estate plan, I'd be more than happy just to look at it to make sure it's up to date. Because sometimes laws change as well. Although I'm hoping every estate plan out there, I know ours are, but hopefully every estate plan out there does account for certain changes. It kind of covers you for that. But laws change sometimes and it's not in your document. It doesn't account for it.
Well, and then a lot of the time, obviously, if we're not keeping up with all those things, which I think most people aren't, then we won't know. So calling and asking those questions is important.
It never hurts.
Yeah, exactly. I do want to talk about your firm specifically. You've shared a lot of information about different estate planning elements, but the Barkho Law Firm is a really interesting concept that you guys have. Can you tell us a little bit about the firm?
So I think what's special about our firm, it's that we're a family. It's me and my sister
Literally,
Dahlia. We opened our law firm after working with other firms, which was great, but we really wanted to serve the community in a way that we wanted to. It's not just another file on our desk. It's every family we meet, we kind of treat them like family, and that's not just a line. At the end of my meetings, I get up, I get hugs from my clients.
Aww.
We're remote right now, so we do go to our clients' homes a lot. I'm offered tea. I'll sit and have snacks with them as we're working and talking. Kind of becomes like a relationship is formed.
And it should be
big.
because you're talking about really important and sometimes scary topics.
Emotional topics.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure.
So you and your sister went into business together, which I think is amazing. Obviously, you must have a really good relationship. But she actually practices a different type of law.
Yes. Yep. So she focuses her practice on personal injury, auto accidents, slip and falls, any kind of accident. That's kind of her area of law, whereas I run our estate planning department. Something I thought didn't really know I was going to do in law school. Coming out of law school, I really didn't know what area I wanted to practice. I just knew I wanted to help people. Like, my biggest thing was, what can I do to help someone? And estate planning kind of just came out of nowhere for me. And I realized that, wow, this is really actually making a difference in people's lives, getting those hugs after meetings and having tea, with Mrs. Smith or whomever. It's great. It's great. And I'm so happy it's a field that kind of fell into my lap. It's wonderful.
Did you and your sister always know that you wanted to practice law? Was it coincidental? Was it like a family-based sort of career?
So growing up, since we were kids, my sister knew she wanted to be a lawyer.
Okay.
She was all about it. I had no idea. When I went to Wayne State for undergrad, I kind of bounced around a little bit. I wanted to be a dentist, and then I wanted to be an engineer, and I'm like, what am I doing? I took one class with her because she was certain about law. So I
Okay.
just took one legal class with her, and I really enjoyed it, and I really understood it well, that I just kept going with it. And the next thing you knew, I
Wow.
was in law school, and I'm just like, how did this happen?
That's amazing.
It kind of chose me, so to say.
I kind of like that you mentioned that though, because I feel like these days, like people feel like you have to have a plan for your life right away, and but
okay not to.
it is okay.
It's okay not to.
It's okay to have a bunch of different interests. I mean,
Yeah.
and look at like you followed your heart, you tried, and you're like,
Mhm.
this is where I'm meant to
This
be.
is it, yeah.
I love that.
Mhm. It's fun.
What did
It's
she
exciting.
say? She was like, "Oh, you copying me, girl."
Yeah, I pretty much followed in her footsteps. We went to the same undergrad. We went to the same law school. It was kind of fun.
That's
It was
actually
fun.
awesome. And then how amazing is it to have like someone so close as especially when you're trying to like make decisions in school and stuff, be like, "Yep, I already did that. I know exactly what you should do."
Yeah, and it was great. She kind of mentored me throughout everything. She's been practicing law for about 10 years, I would say. And I am just about 5.
Yeah.
So she is a little older. She has a little more experience than I do. So it was nice to have her as just kind of as a mentor and as someone to
Yeah.
guide me through everything. It was
Absolutely.
great.
Especially like when you first get out and like you said, you're trying to find that niche for yourself
Yeah.
because there are so many
So many
different,
areas.
yeah.
Literally, and like anything you could touch on, there is a legal
Yeah,
field for it.
exactly.
Yeah.
I also really liked that you mentioned that you go to your client's house because I
Mhm.
think, like you said, obviously all of your clients are not seniors, but if you
Mhm.
are, sometimes they do have mobility
Mhm.
issues and things like that that make it much harder for them to get out. And so being able to do that, I think really adds a personable touch that maybe not every type of law or
Mhm.
lawyer will do.
Yeah, we are remote right now, so we do lots of Zoom meetings, and
Which is great if you're trying to get, multiple people in. If you have a spouse or a child or another friend that you want involved in the plan, I think
Mhm.
that's
they
great.
all join. I've met with families where son is in Florida, the daughter is
That's
in
right.
California, mom and dad are here in Michigan. They're whomever else is at work, and everyone just joins in on the Zoom meeting. But I have found that lots of senior citizens aren't very familiar with Zoom,
This
or they
is
just
true.
don't like the technology. And
Yeah.
I don't blame them because sometimes it's kind of iffy.
Yeah.
But they do. We offer in-home visits, and
Mhm.
we've always been welcomed into the homes, and it's great. It gives people some security. They
Yeah.
feel more comfortable talking about what something this emotional and this serious. It helps them open up a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. I
And it's
imagine
just
it would.
It's convenient. It's just
Well,
convenient.
yeah, most importantly, you're gonna have to do all the
Yes.
driving. Yeah, I love that. Can you think of any fun client stories that really stick out in your mind?
I don't know if I have a specific story. I think the biggest thing to me that always kind of makes me so happy, or kind of makes this all worth it, like I
Yeah.
mentioned, are the hugs.
Yeah.
I've had families or clients cry in front of me, which makes
Yeah.
me cry as I'm talking to them. It's just the hug at the end of your meeting really
Mhm.
makes you feel like, okay, you really just helped this family. I mean, having an estate plan might not seem like the most important thing in the world to some, but to someone who's going through an illness, or to someone who
Yeah.
knows something might occur, and you help them through it, and just
Mhm.
getting that hug at the end and the thank you at
Mhm.
the end, there's nothing like it.
Well, you're just relieving a lot of stress and anxiety. It can
Mhm.
be such a scary time
Mhm.
if they do wait for like a crisis type of situation.
Mhm.
So I can see, yeah, absolutely.
It happens, yeah.
I can see
It's
how that would be
it's the best part.
the
It
thing
really is.
that you get addicted to.
Yeah, it makes all of it worth it. All the drives and all the late nights of drafting and all that.
Oh my
It's all worth it.
Yeah, yeah. Oh my gosh, don't even want to think about that. And it's so funny too. I don't want to bring up school again, but it's like, oh, you think, oh, as soon as I'm done with this, I won't have all this.
Oh,
It's
no.
you get homework in a different way.
Yeah,
Yes,
yes.
for sure. I just again want to mention like advice on estate planning or elder law. It is not just for seniors. Like we cannot drive that home enough.
Yes, it's honestly for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
There's something for everyone. I guess the advice that you're saying I would
Mhm.
give would be just do it. Just make the first phone call.
Mhm.
It doesn't have to be to me. It could be to anyone, but I would love it if you called me. But, make that first phone call, get things rolling. You could take it as slow as you want.
At least start with a questionnaire. At least get some sort of information on the things
Educate
that you want to
yourself on
talk
it, yeah.
about, for sure.
That's the biggest thing, is just to get it done. Lots of people feel like, oh, I'm young, I'm healthy. I don't need to do it now. I'll do it later. I'll do it after I have kids, or I'll do it after I buy that house.
Years just slip on by.
Oh, they do. Oh, they do. Especially when you do have those kids, you're not going to have the time.
Yeah.
It's not going to be top of mind. It's just do it, get it done. And then you just have the peace of mind. You put it in your drawer and you don't have to think about it for a while, you know?
Yeah. Or even if you just start with one thing that's important to you.
I agree. Yeah.
One thing and just keep building.
And if there was one that you would do, I would say for sure start with the powers of attorney. That's the one thing I would say that everyone over the age of 18 should have in place to protect them.
Yeah.
Would be the powers of attorney for sure.
If for some reason they didn't and they were married, would it automatically be their spouse?
Not necessarily. So, let's say me and my husband don't have any planning done and he has his separate bank account or I have my separate bank account. If something were to happen to him and I try to do something with that bank account, they're not letting me touch it because my name's not on it. If my husband's name is on the house and my name is not, I have to go through probate to keep my own house. So being married doesn't automatically give you anything.
I'm so glad we brought that up because I think that that's a myth as well.
Oh, yes.
Oh, well, we're married, so it's fine.
Hospitals sometimes they do. I've heard sometimes they don't, but making decisions in the hospital doesn't automatically go to your husband or wife. What happens if your in-laws are fighting you on a decision and you know what your husband or your wife wanted? Now it's like you're in the hospittal fighting over what's going to happen to someone.
That happens all the time.
It happens
and it's
a lot.
Terrible. It's terrible.
Scary.
So just, our advice is just take that guesswork out, get the hard questions done so that in the event that something terrible does happen, you don't have to stress about that because that part's already done. You just focus on getting that person well or whatever, spending whatever quality time you can if it is that sort of situation where someone, is in hospice or something like that.
But yeah, that's my biggest piece of advice. It's be prepared.
So just to reiterate a little bit for our audience, the Barkho Law Firm is an all-inclusive law firm, and they do specialize in a variety. Like we mentioned, Donna does estate planning, and then her sister Dahlia has personal injury. And I think that those are two very important aspects of law because, again, don't know what can happen until it happens. We encourage our listeners to contact the Barkho Law Firm for a free consultation. Like she said, she's happy to educate you and help get that plan started and sort of shake off maybe some of those fears that you have about talking with a lawyer. I mean, she is not scary. You don't have to be, not scary, but very knowledgeable, and I think that sometimes even just people talking, they're like, oh my God, the lawyer,
Lawyers have a bad rep.
So scary.
Lawyers have a bad rep of being scary. Yeah, and I hope I'm not scary.
Well, not scary until she needs to be,
Yeah.
So we do encourage you to reach out to the Barkho Law Firm. Again, whether that's you've been injured in an accident or you need representation in that sort of way, or if it's just planning for your family's legacy and your future. You can contact them at 248-744-6585 or at barkholaw.com. And that's Barkho, you got to make sure that that's in there because
silent H.
yeah, exactly. Is there any other thing that you want to share? Any other advice besides giving you a call?
No, I think starting there. I mean, that's the most important thing is taking that first step. Just call. There's no pressure. I never pressure anyone into anything. I just want to educate. And then after that, first meeting where you do get some education, you get to make the decision of what you want to do and what you need.
I think too, I think it's cool to share that you have done webinars in the past. And so if they want to check out your website and maybe see if you have anything upcoming, if you're planning anything, or you can call them and ask those things where she does do seminars similar to this. Luckily for you, you got it today and you don't have to go and search it. But if you have your own questions, again, I think it's wonderful to call. Can you share the phone number one more time for us, please?
Yeah, it's 248-744-6585.
Thank you so much for sharing that with our listeners. It's very important, very, very important topic. I know
Yeah.
I gotta be talking to her here pretty soon myself. If you have any questions about estate planning or anything that we talked about in the show, anything senior related, you can email me at kl@theseniormovers.com, or you can give us a call at 586-204-8500. And again, Donna, thank you so much for being here.
Oh,
I
thank
know
you
that
for
you are
having
so
me.
busy helping all of your clients, and I appreciate you educating our audience and of
Absolutely.
course me.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's been fun.
I'll
been
see
fun.
you next time on the Senior Podcast Show.